Okay, good morning. Okay, this is BPA 100 class, Introduction to Public Administration. Okay, in this video lecture, I will be discussing to you the topic, the role of public administration in a modern society. Okay, in this era of frenzied efforts toward purposeful nation building, the prime objective of emerging or developing countries, as well as the revitalizing old states, is to adapt to existing circumstances and influences. So, for example, Philippines. Philippines is an example of emerging or developing country. And the prime objective of the Philippines, in order to have a purposeful nation building, is to adapt to existing circumstances and influences. So, adapt change, no, adapt existing circumstances. Their common problem is to weave their newfound form of organization or administrative structure into a strong nationhood. The common desire, therefore, is for a more satisfying structure for a revitalized national existence. Efforts are being extended toward increasing the range of functions for which public administration must be responsible. So, efforts are hereby extended in order to understand the increasing functions, no, the increasing range of functions for which public administration must be responsible of. So in order for us, no, especially kayo, practitioners in the field of public administration, for you to understand the increasing range of functions of the field public administration, there must be the efforts to be extended. Unless an effective system of public administration exists in the government, the national aspiration will not thrive. So that means, no, unless an effective system of public administration exists, the national aspiration will not thrive. So it simply means that public administration is very crucial. No, the existence of public administration is crucial. Not ju- is crucial in attaining the national aspiration, or shall we say, effective system of public administration is important, no, to exist in the government in order to thrive the national aspiration. A good government survives when it provides good public administration. So it simply means that good public administration is essential towards the survival of the government. When can we say that public administration is good? Public administration is good when the people find in the government the full expression of popular will. So, full expression of popular will. In that sense, no, you can say that public administration is good if you find people in the government expressing, no, if you find when the people find in the government the full expression of their will, no, the popular will, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So for democracy, wherein people are given the full expression of popular will. So we can say that public administration is good. Okay, what is the basic foundation of the government? What is the basic foundation of the government? The basic foundation of government is service to the people. So the prime function of the government is service to the people, to serve the people. The basic foundation of government, of which public administration is an essential tool, meaning, si public ad, it is an essential tool in attaining or performing the basic foundation of government. Um, the basic foundation of government cannot be realized without public administration as a tool. So public administration is vital towards the attainment of the objective of the government. No, it is public ad who will carry all the, the policies, the programs of the government serving the people. The government must not only make known its actuations to meet the people's essential needs and desires, but it must also make the people understand its ways. This can only be possible if lines of communication are kept open between the government and the various sectors of society. The effort is a continuing process, which must never lag. No one at the helm of government can afford to dispense with this requirement if he wants to be responsive to the needs of the times. The machinery of the government must at all times be attuned to implement the government programs for the welfare of the people and be fully understood by the people in this effort. Okay, what is the machinery or who is the machinery of the government? I am referring to public administration. Public administration is said to be the machinery of the government, which um, implement the programs of the government, policies of the government, in for for the welfare of the people, and it must be fully understood by the people in this effort. The government should exert effort, considerable effort, in reaching out to the people. This can be attained by disseminating information about the government and at the same time determining the people's needs, sentiments, and attitudes toward the government. Now, how could the government reach out to the people? So, do you think the government could reach out to the people without public administration? No. So, government need public administration as an essential tool in reaching out to the people, understanding, disseminating information to the people, understanding that their needs, sentiments, and attitudes towards the government. Unfortunately, however, the government often becomes so thoroughly enmeshed in activity for its own sake that it often loses sight of its real goal. So sometimes ang gobyerno malimtan nila nga ilaing primary function is service to the people, to serve the people, to provide the needs of the people. Sometimes individuals who sit in any government position, they keep on um, fighting for their own sake, the personal benefits, not for the benefit of the public. The government calls on public administration for the utilization of this important aspect of its work. So si public ad, importante ka isa in utilizing the important aspect of government's work. Meaning without public ad, government cannot perform this aspect of work. Hence, the role of public administration in society since the dawn of organized government revolves around the concept of public service. So, time, ang primary objective of the government is to serve the people. Government cannot do it alone without public administration. It calls on public administration to utilize this important aspect of work, meaning it is public ad who will carry all the programs, policies of the government towards the people, serving the people. Therefore, the role of public ad in society, even since the dawn of organized government, revolves around the concept of public service to the people. Okay, in this chapter, the following subjects will be discussed: the new role of public administration, executive leadership's role of public administration, and public administration's role in designing policy. Okay, the new role of public administration. What is the new role of public administration? Since the 1940s, the government has increasingly involved itself in national development, particularly in its economic and social spheres, as it expands from its traditional functions of safeguarding the country's national security and providing essential public facilities and services. Since 1940s, the government itself increasingly involved itself in national development. So, the gobyerno, it is really created as a social institution in order to involve itself to increase or help national development, particularly in economic and social spheres, providing essential public facilities and services to the public. Consequently, it expands not only its machinery but also the main thrust of public administration from the attainment of efficiency and economy and efficiency in public services to that of serving as change agent in the task of nation building. So the new role of public administration is being change agent. So public administrators are said to be change agents, stewards of change, agent of change, which lead towards purposeful nation building. Change agent. It is the new role of public administration. It seems to have significantly contributed to the shaping of both the aspirations and expectations of the people in its efforts to improve their quality of life. So, the role of being change agent signifies that public administration shape both the aspirations and expectations of the people in an effort to improve the quality of life of the people. However, in many instances, the increased resources of the government are not proportionate to the increasing citizens' demands for government services. The state of government affairs therefore ushered in a dilemma for public administrators in their efforts to narrow down or bridge the gap between the fast-changing role of public ad and its almost static administrative ethos and structure. That's the problem, no dilemma for public administrator. Grabe kapaspas ang changing of role ni public ad. However, administrative ethos and structure remain as static. Walay na otro sa structure. Ang role na otro. Richard A. Johnson, Fremont E. Cass, and James E. Rosenway expressed the common dilemma of the administrators as follows. The organization takes many of its values from the broader sociocultural environment. A basic premise is that the organization as a subsystem of society must accomplish certain goals which are determined by the broader system. The organization performs a function for the society, and if it is to be successful in receiving inputs, it must conform to social requirements. So the organization takes many values from the broader sociocultural environment. As a subsystem of society, it must accomplish certain goals and objectives, which are determined also with the broader society. It performs functions for the society. It must conform to social requirements. Okay, says Professor of Public Administration Arsenio B. Talingdan. Says Professor, according to Arsenio P. Talingdan, a professor of public administration, he said, the ends of public administration are the ultimate objectives of the state itself. Public administration expands with the development of public interests. As the administrative system grows and becomes more complex, the role of public administration expands. The public service is one of the principal pivots where people try to attain the good life. That's a point, of Professor Arsenio P. Talingdan. The ends of public administration are also the ultimate objective of the state itself. So, kung saan ultimate objective sa state, sa estado, that's also the ends of public administration. Also the objectives of public administration. Public administration expands, with the development of public interests. So as public interests develop, public administration also expands. As administrative system grows or even the government becomes more complex, the role of public ad also expands in order to respond certain changes. Public service is one of the principal pivots where people try to attain good life. These are not empty words. History has confirmed this statement. It is essential, therefore, that public administrators learn from their practical experiences in the past. In here, there is truth in the saying, what we saw today will sprout tomorrow. That's a general rule, a principle. What we saw today will sprout tomorrow. The 1987 Constitution of the Philippines, in its concept of national economy and patrimony, provides in Section 19 of Article 12, which states that the state shall regulate or prohibit private monopolies when the public interest so requires. So, the state really regulates or prohibits the monopoly of private monopolies, when public interest is required. No combinations in restraint of trade or unfair competition shall be allowed. So, whenever public interest is required, so the state prohibit private monopolies. It must be deal with the government through its public administration. Carrying out such policy of the state is the responsibility of administration, the public administration, to carry out such policy of the state. Thus, empowered by the laws of the land, public administration regulates the acquisition, ownership, use, enjoyment, and disposition of private property. It is the government who regulates that one, which carried out by the public administration. since public ad is empowered by the law of the land, as the machinery of the government. It is the one who really regulates the acquisition, how property is acquired, how ownership, the use, enjoyment, and disposition. To diffuse equitably both the ownership and the profits of property. property. As Robert Prestos says, public administration in its most basic sense involves the coordination and mobilization of individual and group efforts with a view toward the implementation of public policy. It's according to Robert Prestos. No? In the basic sense, public ad involves coordination of individual and group efforts or mobilization of individual and group efforts toward the implementation of public policy for public interest and for public welfare. That's the first role, the new role of public ad being change agent. Second role, executive leadership's role of public administration. So public ad has its role of being executive leader, no? Executive leadership's role. Theoretically, a public administrator is not expected to have any part in policy decisions. No? Theoretically, because from the term administrator, mo administer siya, it will execute. So this is expected, no? It is not expected to have any part in any policy decision. Since he belongs to the civil service system, he expected not to influence or intervene in the process of the making the original decision. He is not expected to make a subsequent decision to carry out either, but because of his technical knowledge, practical experience, and available resources at his command, politicians have to call upon him in the enactment of appropriate legislation. No? Sometimes ginatawag, politicians, especially um, politicians or technically know and um, wala ka bang kaagan, no, how to enact an appropriate legislation. So they will need assistance, no, even from lawyers or even from public administrators who have technical knowledge, practical experience, and available resources. In fact, a public administrator has to fill the gap in solving the administrative problems of policy implementation by involving himself in its policy formulation. No, balik lang. Theoretically, public administrator is not expected to have any part in policy decision. That's really true, no? Public ad supposedly administrator must focus on policy implementation. However, in order to fill the gap, in order to solve existing administrative problems, public administrator has to engage himself with policy implementation by involving himself also in its policy formulation. Because it is very difficult to implement if you don't participate or involve in the policy formulation. The politicians need information, which is only the vast and practical experience of public administrators can adequately supply. As it is, public administrators in carrying out on the routine operations of the business of government become administrative experts. Public ad, public administrators are said to be administrative experts, which carry on the routine or operations of the business of government. They are called upon to furnish much of the advice upon which public policy is shaped, thereby influencing its final form and substance. So politicians, before they implement such policy, they call the advice or they ask for advice from public administrators upon which public policy is shaped, and then it can there in that sense administrators can influence um, the final form and substance of the policy. In another situation, the role of public administration is not only to implement the policy, but to give meaning to it by affecting economic and social behavior, of which results could be achieved by its own operations. So from the term executive leadership role, so si public ad nakafocus siya sa executive branch of the government, which the function is to implement policy. However, it is stated no in this second role, the role of public ad is not exclusive only on policy execution, but public ad has to engage or involve himself in the policy formulation in order to bridge the gap, di ba, among administrative problems in implementing policy for public welfare. So the role of public administration is not only to implement the policy. Di lang na, di ay ang role ng public ad. Di lang kayo mag-implement of policy, but also to give meaning to it, to give meaning to the policy by affecting the economic and social behavior of which results could be achieved by its own operations. With society's increased demands for the government services and subsidies, public administration expanded its administrative machinery to satisfy them. With society's increased demands for the government services and subsidies, public ad expanded its administrative machinery to satisfy them. As society progresses, it creates new needs, and each one of them provides the government not only additional source of power but also more functions. Hence, it assures the permanency of public administration, for it compelled the government to take in continuing responsibilities which of course can be fulfilled only through continuity of operations. So as society progresses, it creates new needs, and each one of them provides the government not only additional source of power but also one more function. Hence, to assure the permanency of public administration, for it compelled the government to take in continuing responsibilities which of course can be fulfilled only through continuity of operations. Okay, the multifunction of government can best be understood by studying the following classifications suggested by Robert Sever and Charles Page. According to them, government has a multifunction to perform. First, functions peculiar to the state. Functions for which the state is well adapted. Functions for which the state is ill adapted, and functions which the state is incapable of performing. So, government has to perform multifunction, no? That includes functions that the state is incapable of performing. Itong mga dili kaya nga i-perform sa state, that is to be performed by the government. And then functions for which the state is ill adapted, meaning the government has the function to perform certain functions which the state is ill adapted, not totally adapted or well adapted by the government. Even functions peculiar to the state or functions distinctive to a state or innate to the state. Okay, functions peculiar to the state includes innate sa estado. So that's a function of the government, meaning these are the inherent functions of the government. For instance, maintenance of order, maintenance of peace and order. This is very important function of the government. If the government cannot maintain order, what will happen to the state? So that's a function peculiar to the state. Attainment of justice is another important function of the government. If justice is not well attained, what will happen to the state? Protection of a system of property rights and formation of administrative and foreign policies. Next, functions for which the state is well adapted. Conservation of natural resources, control of private monopoly, maintenance of public services such as parks, playgrounds, schools, museums, and preservation of health. These are functions for which the state is well adapted. It must continue, this must be performed, by the government. Functions to which the state is ill adapted. These will vary with the conditions, but in general, there are functions which do not serve the needs of the entire community, such as religion and literacy and artistic production and evaluation. So, ill adapted meaning not totally adapted, but they are very important. They do not serve the needs of the entire community, but it has to be performed. Functions which the state is incapable of performing. Control of people's opinions. This is another function of the government. The government must know how to control people's opinion and regulation of morality. On the other hand, These functions mentioned, diba, by Page and Robert Maxever, it can be categorized into two distinct functions: constituent functions and ministrant functions. So the government has two distinct functions. When we say constituent functions, these are functions which are compulsory in nature. What do you mean by compulsory in nature? Dapat i-perform good sa gobyerno, no? Required. What will happen if this is not carried out? So the state itself will be in chaos or will be in conflict. For example, maintenance of peace and order. This is a constituent function. So kinahanglan, no, it is compulsory in nature. It must be performed by the government. Nga naman, if peace and order is not maintained, what will happen to the society? What will happen to the state itself? So it will be in conflict and chaos. Attainment of social justice. This is also important. So these are constituent functions. Importante nga paghahimuon sa gobyerno. On the other hand, the government also has its own ministrant functions. These are non-compulsory in nature. Pwede ra, madili i-perform. But once performed by the government, it can advance the interests of the general public. So, dili siya compulsory, pwede siya dili i-perform. Pero pag i-perform siya sa gobyerno, it can advance the interests of the general public. For example, public works, no? Public works like cementation of public highways. Pwede ra ba nga dili lang sa isiminto. Non-compulsory siya. Pero pag isiminto siya, isiminto sa gobyerno, no, it can advance the interest of the general public. Accessibility of goods and services, public highways. So these are ministrant functions. Clearly, public administration has become inextricably interwoven into every aspect of human life. So interwoven and inextricably interwoven, meaning part na gid siya, no, part and parcel of human life. Continuity in policy making is essential for effective public administration. Though essential, however, continuity in political decision does not always assure the existence of democratic institutions. Okay, national level politics it is an extension of local level politics. The latter is the microcosm of the former. However, this continuity in political culture is not reflected only in the societies upholding democratic institutions, but also true in other systems classified under what many call democratic form. But what use? But of what use is a policy? Para asa gid ng policy? Okay, we are keep on discussing policy. Diba? Ang gobyerno, siya ang formulate sa policy, siya ang implement sa policy. Which is carried out with the by public administration. What is policy? Policy is a projected program of goal, values, and practices. A projected program, no? That values and it can be also practices. Policy process, according to Daniel Lerner and Harold D. Laswell, is a excuse me, is the formulation and application of identifications, demands, and expectations concerning the future interpersonal relations to self. So policy process. Formulation, application of identification, demands, and expectations concerning the future interpersonal relations to self. That's policy process. So, na demands, na problems sa society, community, and then in order to solve the problem, there must be formulation of policy and application of policy, in order to address the demands and expectations of concerning the future also of the public. That's policy process. Lastly, public administration's role in designing policy. So we have discussing about policy, right? Public ad is part and parcel of any government, even in policy making. No, that means public ad is part or has its role in designing policy. Public ad is for designing policy. Along with its role in legislative leadership, the bureaucracy of public administration plays the major role in any given policy issue when a vacuum exists in the area. The bureaucracy of public ad plays the major role in a given policy issue when a vacuum exists in the area. Policy making is a prerogative of the political or elected actors in government. Prerogative niya sa mga political or elected actors in government. For example, senators, congressmen, they are policymakers and they are elected actors in government. And prerogative nila ang policy making. As pointed out by Avery, Liserson, and Fritz Morstein Marx, or F.A. Marx, the primary organ or policy sanction is the legislature. So the primary organ or policy sanction of any government is the legislature or the legislative branch. In the main, it lays down policy in general terms. For For purposes of effective government, such as general policy, is usually done by administrative policy formulation as a means of giving more precise expression to statutory directions addressed to the executive branch. Now, it is clearly stated that the primary organ or policy sanction is the legislature. So the primary policy-making body is really the legislature. In the main, it lays policy in general terms. However, for purposes of effective government, such as general policy is usually done by administrative policy formulation. So, inani kasi na, the Congress enacted Republic Act. No? They proposed in the Congress, bill is being proposed, and the bill is once submitted to the executive and then signed by the president, it will become a law. So, through Republic Act. So, the lawmaking body is really the legislature. But in some cases, for purposes of effective government, executive branch can also design policy through public administration, and that is called administrative policy formulation as a means of giving more precise expression to such statutory directions addressed to the executive. For example, ordinances, diba? The mayor can the one who sign the ordinances, resolution, special order, memorandum. Those are administrative policy to be performed or to be designed by public administration. Public administrator, particularly the city administrator, has dual responsibility. James M. Banovitz and his colleagues said that for the provision of effective organizational leadership and to the public which he serve as a government employee. So, public administrator has dual responsibility. The first responsibility is for the provision of effective organizational leadership. His task of running a thought ship is directing the programs and workers under his supervision. So public ad is tasked to run a ship, which is the government, directing the programs of the government and the workers under his supervision. Second responsibility is to the public, which he serves as a government employee. So public ad, also the public administrators are essential, to supervise the workers, the programs, and the workers of the government. At the same time, it serves also as a government employee, which is responsible to the public which is served. So he is required to act in a manner which meets common expectations regarding responsive and responsible government. The emerging role of public administrator, due to the ever-changing conditions and the rising expectations of the citizenry, is becoming more difficult. His problems concerning not only the physical features of the place, but also the social and psychological conditions of its inhabitants, as well as frustratingly complex, divisive, and challenging. So, the emerging role of public administrator, due to the ever-changing conditions and rising expectations of the citizenry, is becoming more difficult also. In the process of nation building, some nations adopted the authoritarian form of government of the countries of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Regardless of the form of government, public administration is an essential part of it. So, whether democracy ba na siya, parliamentary ba na siya, monarchy ba na siya, oligarchy ba na siya, public administration is an essential part of it, or part of the government. It is through public administration that people transact their business with the government, because it is public ad which serve as the bridge between the people and the government. So it is through public administration that people can transact business to the government. The character, nature, and scope of public administration are constantly changing. On this, Dale Gillette and Hitcher and William Henry Harbold point out that the extent, organization, and procedures of public administration itself are closely influenced by the nature of the objectives being pursued and the social conditions prevailing. Since these are not constant, neither are the forms of administration. So that ends my lecture for the role of public administration in the modern society. Thank you for listening. God bless us all.